Alright, this is the review for the Unit 4 test that we have coming up. So I'm just going to go through it, hopefully clear up any questions you might have. So remember, this first part is on factoring, and when you look at factoring, the first thing you should do is go through our rules. So there is no greatest common factor, but it is more than 4, so that tells us to group. So I'm going to rewrite that. I'm going to group the first two together, put a plus sign between, and group the last two together. Then I pull out the greatest common factor, which for the first one would be x squared, and then I get x plus 4. So I want this to be x plus 4, so these are both negative. I'll pull out a negative 9 and get x plus 4. So then we have x squared. Let's pull out the x plus 4. So I pull the x plus 4 out of both. That leaves me x squared minus 9 because those disappear. And then again, because they're squared, we should check to see if we can factor it any further. So this x squared minus 9 fits the rule of a squared minus b squared because I can take the square root of both, which is a plus b and a minus b. And so that would be x plus 4, and then x plus 3, x minus 3. And we're just factoring, so we're not finding the zeros, so we stop there. So the second one, 8m to the third minus 27. So again, I check for no greatest common factor, and there's not. So now I'm going to check, because I can't use the x method because of that cube term, I'm going to check to see if it fits any other shortcuts. And so the only one we have with cubes and a minus would be, can I write it in the form of a cubed minus b cubed? And I can change 8m into 2m cubed minus 3 cubed, because 3 cubed is 27. And so remember, this rule is a minus b, and then a squared plus ab plus b squared. So now I'm just going to multiply that together. And I'm going to replace every a is going to be 2m and every b is going to be 3. So this becomes 2m minus 3. And then 2m squared, which would be 4m squared, plus 2m times 3 would be 6m. And then plus b squared, so 3 squared is 9. And so that would be factored all the way. Number 3, again, the first thing we check for is greatest common factor. So in this case, 2 goes into everything. And also they all have a c, so I can pull a c out. And I get 6c squared minus 11c minus 10. And then we can try the x method. So that would be negative 60 and negative 11, which the factors of 60 that subtract to give me 11 are 15 and 4, and the 15 has to be negative. And then here's where I have to remember, because that first term is not 1, I have to build the box. So the first term goes in the first box, the last term in the last box, and then I fill these in with c's. And we take out the greatest common factor. So 6 and 4 would be 2, and then they both have a c. And 15 and 10 would be 5. And remember, the first box is negative, so that's 2c minus 5. And then this way, 6 and 15 would be 3, and they both have a c. And then 4 and 10 would be 2, and the first box is positive, so plus. So we don't want to forget that 2c. And then we get 3c plus 2, and 2c minus 5. And remember, order doesn't make a difference on that. So this next one, again, we have 4 terms, so I'm going to try that by grouping. If I group the first 2 together, and the second 2 together, scratch that. First thing I should do is the greatest common factor, and I can pull an n squared out of everything. So I pull the n squared out, and then we get 3n to the third plus 9n squared minus 50n minus 150. Okay? Now I'm going to group what's left. So I'm going to forget about this n squared just till we get to the end. I'm going to pull out a 3n squared and get n plus 3. And so I want this to be n plus 3. So I'm going to pull out a negative 50 n, just negative 50, and then I get n plus 3. And now since there's n plus 3 in both of them, I can pull out the n plus 3. I get 3n squared minus 50. And then I have to remember that n squared I had to start with. Now because I have a squared here, I should check to see if I can factor that further. But it's two terms and it's minus, so the only thing it could be would be if it's a squared minus b squared. And I can't take the square root of either one, so I'm done. So these are the factoring ones. So on 5 through 8, it says find all the zeros in the given polynomial function. Do not give any decimal answers. So we'll just leave it as whatever form we end up with. So on this one, on the first one on 5, they tell you that x is equal to 5. And so remember, we do the synthetic division. And we use the 5 because we don't do the opposite, and else it was x minus 5, then we would use plus 5. So then we have to remember 3, because there is no x squared, I have to put a 0. Negative 73 and negative 10. Do the synthetic division. 3, 15. Remember, you multiply, put it there, add 15. That would be 75. 2, 10, and we get 0. If you don't get 0, that's you made a mistake. So then what I have left, I could try the x method, but there's no factors of 6 that add up to 15, so we have to do the quadratic formula. So this is our a, b, and c. So negative 15 plus or minus 225 minus 4 times 3 times 2 all over 2 times 3, which would be 6. So this is 1224. So 225 minus 24 would give us negative 15 plus or minus the square root of 201 over 6. And I can't simplify 201, so I'm just going to leave it that way. And I don't need to change it to decimal, just leave it like that. So on these next ones, it asks us to graph it and after we find the zeros. So when we start on this one, we have x to the 4th plus 2x to the 3rd minus 29x squared plus 42x. So we should take out the greatest common factor first. I can pull an x out. And I get x cubed plus 2x squared minus 29x plus 42. So we've already found one 0. We've got a 0 at 0 because 0 would make x equal to 0. I can't do the... we know negative 7 works, so I'm going to go ahead and do negative 7. So 1, 2, negative 29, and 42. So 1, negative 7, negative 5, 35, 6, negative 42, 0. Then we have, so we have negative 7 is another 0, which we knew. 6 and negative 5 would be negative 3 and negative 2. So that gives us x minus 3 and x minus 2, which gives me zeros at 3 and at 2. And so now, I'm going to plot these zeros. I have one at 0 and negative 7, 2 and 3. Now, here's where we use the end behavior. Because my leading coefficient is positive, I know it ends up going up to the right. And because it's even, it goes the same direction at this side, so it's going like that. And so now I know I'm not going to worry on the test that you find these values here unless they ask you to. And so all I'm going to do is I know it goes down. Something like this. I can tell you because I've plugged in the numbers. You could make a chart and plug numbers in and find the y values. But I'm not going to worry about that, just so you understand this. These actually go way down into, you have to make your y values worth a lot, because if I put in, let's see, if I put in, what number I put in? Well, I put in 1 and you end up with like a really small negative number, so we'd be way down here when I put in like a number in here. It's way down. So I'm not going to worry about that. All I want to know is that you understand the end behavior and then fill it in something like that. So So there's nothing, you're not going to get anything long for these parts in between on how high or low they are. And you're not going to have a graphing calculator on the test either. So this next one, we know 2 is a 0. So 1, -3, -10, 24. So 1. So when we do synthetic division with 2, we get 1, 2, -1, -2, -12, -24, 0. So then we can do the x method. We get -12 and -1, so that'd be -4 and +3. So x minus 4 and x plus 3. So our zeros are 2, 4, and -3. So we plot those. -3, 2, 4. Again, my leading coefficient is positive, so I know it ends up going up. It's an odd power, so it goes opposite the other way, so it's like this. And so now again, we're just going to make some kind of graph in between that, just so I know that you understand how the end behavior works. Now, on this one, again, we can try grouping this one because it's 4 terms. Or we can, let's see, if we pull I can pull a 9x squared out and get x minus 3. And then out of this part, -4x plus 12, I can pull a -4 out and get x minus 3. Pull the x minus 3 out, and we get 9x squared minus 4, which would be 3x plus 2. And 3x minus 2, because that's in the form of a squared minus b squared. I can take the square root of both. So my answers are 3, -2/3, and +2/3. Now, you could do this by doing the p over q. The one on the test I'm not sure about, but we need to know how to do that anyway. So in this case, it'd cross at 3. Now, because these are fractions, just estimate. So I'm estimating where those are. My first term is positive, so I know it goes up to the right. It's an odd, so it goes down to the left. And so I just need to fill that in somehow. 9 should be easy. The number of zeros, remember that's our highest power. Tells us the number of zeros. So it's not the first term. My highest power is x to the 7th, so there's 7 zeros. My highest power here is x to the 5th, so 5 zeros. Now on this one, I left a number out here. It doesn't make any difference. It'll be on the test. It's how many x's do you have? I have 1x here, 1x here, and I'm going to get 3 x's here because it's cubed. So I have a total of x to the 5th, and so I have 5 zeros. Again, this next part should be really quick. It tells us our degree is 5. Well, remember your real zeros are where it crosses the x-axis. This only crosses here, which means I have 1 real zero. And if I have 1 real zero, my degree is 5. I have to have 5 solutions. So my number of imaginary would have to be 4. Here I have degree 8, which means I have 8 solutions, but I don't have any that cross. So there's 0 real zeros. So that would mean that I'd have to have 8 imaginary. Okay? So 0 real zeros, 8 imaginary. Constructing a polynomial when they give you the zeros. So in this case, they give us 5, 1, and -2. So we have to remember the factors are opposite that. So they'd be x minus 5, x minus 1, and x plus 2. And then you just have to multiply that together. So if I multiply this, I would get x squared minus 5x minus x plus 5, and then add like terms. So I get x squared minus 6x plus 5. And then I would multiply that by x plus 2. So x squared times both, so x cubed plus 2x squared minus 6x times both, so minus 6x squared minus 12x. And then 5 times both, so 5x plus 10. So we get x cubed minus 4x squared minus 7x plus 10. And then the next one, on this we have 2 5s, so that just means I have to have x minus 5 and x minus 5. And then I have a 0. So if you have a 0, remember that's just an x. So I multiply this together,
Yeah.
and I get x squared minus 5x minus 5x plus 25.
Yeah.
I'm just videoing. Ooh, sorry. And multiply by x. I'm going to go ahead and simplify that. And so I get x cubed minus 10x squared plus 25x. 13. We have to find all the zeros of the function. So they give us one. So remember, you use the opposite with the synthetic. Write the coefficients. Remember, if it skips a power, you always put a 0. So we get 3, 6, 5, 10, negative 12, negative 24. And then we can try the x method. Negative 36 and 5, so that would be 9 and negative 4. So we have 2, and then negative 9 and positive 4, because remember that's x plus 9 and x minus 4. So those are our zeros. And then on the last one, this is where you have to go through. It says, using the graphing calculator, what we're going to do is going to give you a screenshot of the graph of that. So you're just going to have to take this and find the y-intercepts, or the x-intercepts. The points for the local maximum minimum are. So if we put a graph up here, I've got that one. So you'll have a screenshot like this. And remember, the x's are just where it crosses. The x-intercepts are where it crosses the x-axis. So you just write down those x values, and you can approximate those. And then remember local maximum and minimums. Local maximums are the highest point in an area, so that would be a local maximum. You can put the ordered pair or just the y value. And then the local minimum would be where it turns and goes up. And so that in this case would be negative 8.236, or about negative 8 and about 10. Then you're also going to have to determine where it's increasing. So in this case, remember it's increasing. If we're to write this up, remember it's increasing as it goes from left to right until we get to negative 1.27. So when x is less than negative 1.271, it's increasing. And then it increases again when it's greater than 1.109. And it's decreasing, going down between these two. So negative 1.271 is less than x, and when it's greater, when x is greater than that, and then when it's less than 1.109. So in between those, and you can again do it in words. So hopefully that helps. If you have any questions.